suffering is a universal human experience. No matter one's background, wealth, or circumstance, everyone encounters suffering in some form. From physical pain to emotional distress, from grief and disappointment to existential anxiety, the quest to understand and overcome suffering is timeless. Among the world's great spiritual traditions, Buddhism offers one of the most profound and comprehensive explanations of suffering and its origins. Central to Buddhist philosophy is the investigation of dukkha, commonly translated as suffering, though its meaning extends to dissatisfaction, stress, or unease. Buddhism does not see suffering as merely a problem to be avoided but rather as a key to understanding the nature of existence and achieving liberation. The Buddhist teachings begin with the recognition of suffering and proceed to analyze its causes, its cessation, and the path to freedom. This story will explore in depth what causes suffering according to Buddhism, drawing from key scriptures, philosophical insights, and practical applications of Buddhist thought. Understanding suffering, dukkha. In the heart of Buddhist teaching lies a simple but powerful statement: life is suffering. This assertion, found in the First Noble Truth, often shocks newcomers. But to understand what the Buddha meant, one must explore the layered meaning of dukkha. The meaning of dukkha. The Pali word dukkha is often translated as suffering, but this translation is only partly accurate. Dukkha encompasses a wide range of experiences from outright agony to subtle dissatisfaction. According to Buddhist thought, dukkha is not only about visible forms of pain but also about the impermanence and ungraspable nature of all things. Three categories of dukkha are traditionally outlined. Dukkha, suffering of suffering. This refers to ordinary pain, physical or mental. Examples include illness, injury, grief, or fear. Vipariñāma dukkha, suffering of change. Even pleasurable experiences carry seeds of dukkha because they are impermanent. The happiness from a good meal or a relationship eventually changes or ends, causing distress. Sankhara dukkha, suffering of conditioned existence. This is the most subtle and profound form of suffering. It refers to the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of existence itself due to its constructed, impermanent nature. Understanding these types of suffering is critical because they form the basis for the entire Buddhist path. Rather than escaping or denying suffering, Buddhism encourages a deep investigation into its causes and conditions. The First Noble Truth, dukkha. The Buddha's first teaching after his enlightenment, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma, begins with the declaration of the Four Noble Truths. The first is: there is dukkha. This is not a pessimistic view but a realistic one. The Buddha asks us to look deeply at life to recognize its dissatisfactory nature, not to despair, but to understand. Only through understanding can we find the path beyond suffering. The First Noble Truth outlines various kinds of dukkha: birth, aging, illness, death, union with the unloved, separation from the loved, not getting what one wants, and clinging to the five aggregates. Each of these aspects can be seen in daily life. Birth is accompanied by trauma and vulnerability. Aging brings decline. Illness brings pain and dependence. Death brings fear and grief. And throughout life, we are constantly confronted with unmet desires and impermanent joys. By acknowledging these truths rather than denying them, we begin the journey toward awakening. The Second Noble Truth, the origin of suffering. If the First Noble Truth states that there is suffering, the Second Noble Truth explains why suffering exists. Suffering is caused by craving, tanha. This craving is not simply desire in the ordinary sense. Rather, it refers to a compulsive attachment or thirst that drives us to cling to things, people, experiences, or even ideas. There are three forms of tanha: kama tanha, craving for sensory pleasure; bhava tanha, craving for existence or becoming, desire for identity, status, or continuation; vibhava tanha, craving for non-existence or self-annihilation, often linked with despair or destructive tendencies. Craving arises because we misperceive reality. We see the world through the lens of permanence, selfhood, and controllability. When reality fails to conform to our desires, suffering arises. Ignorance, avijja. Behind craving lies a deeper root, ignorance. Ignorance is the misunderstanding or lack of insight into the true nature of reality. Specifically, ignorance includes not understanding the Four Noble Truths, not perceiving the impermanent, anicca, unsatisfactory, dukkha, and non-self, anatta, nature of existence. mistaking the five aggregates for a permanent self. It is this ignorance that keeps beings trapped in the cycle of samsara, the endless wandering through birth, death, and rebirth. Dependent origination, paticca samuppada, the web of suffering. One of the most profound teachings of the Buddha explaining the cause of suffering is paticca samuppada, or dependent origination. This teaching outlines how suffering arises through a chain of 12 interdependent links. These are not merely philosophical ideas, they are meant to be directly observed in one's own experience. The 12 links of dependent origination. Avijja, ignorance, not understanding the Four Noble Truths and the true nature of reality. Sankhara, volitional formations, mental formations or karmic activities shaped by ignorance. Vijnana, consciousness, the arising of awareness based on karmic seeds. Nama Rupa, name and form, the psychophysical entity, mind and body. Salayatana, six sense bases, the six faculties, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Phassa, contact, the meeting of the sense bases with objects, producing experience. Vedana, feeling, sensation as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Tanha, craving, the arising of desire based on feeling. Upadana, clinging, attachment or grasping based on craving. Bhava, becoming, the process of becoming, or karmic momentum. Jati, birth, rebirth into another existence. Jaramarana, aging and death, the inevitable decline and death that brings sorrow, lamentation, and despair. This cycle perpetuates suffering life after life. Importantly, the Buddha taught that if any link is broken, the cycle can be ended. For example, if ignorance is removed, the rest of the chain collapses. Thus, understanding and wisdom are the antidotes to suffering. The five aggregates, skandhas, and the illusion of self. Another essential concept in understanding the root of suffering is the five aggregates or skandhas, which comprise the conventional self. According to the Buddha, what we call a person is actually a collection of five impermanent and conditioned processes: rupa, form, the physical body or material form; vedana, feeling, sensations experienced through contact; sana, perception, recognition and interpretation; sankhara, mental formations, volitional activities, tendencies, habits; vijnana, consciousness, awareness or knowing of an object. These five aggregates are in constant flux and have no inherent essence. Yet, we mistakenly take them to be I or mine. This misidentification leads to attachment, fear, and ultimately, suffering. For example, someone insulted feels hurt not merely because of the words but because of the egoic attachment to the idea of me. By recognizing the skandhas as empty and impermanent, we reduce clinging and thereby lessen suffering. Karma and the seeds of suffering. Karma, or kama in Pali, plays a crucial role in explaining suffering. It refers to intentional actions, thoughts, words, and deeds that have consequences. Good actions, rooted in generosity, compassion, and wisdom, lead to pleasant results. Bad actions, rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, lead to suffering. Karma is not a system of reward and punishment but of natural causality. It helps explain why some are born into hardship while others are not. Why suffering may seem unfair. How habits and volitions shape our future experience. More importantly, karma emphasizes responsibility. One's present suffering may be rooted in past actions, but one's future well-being is shaped by present intentions. This empowers practitioners to change the causes of suffering through ethical and mindful living. The three poisons, the emotional roots of suffering. At the heart of the Buddhist diagnosis of suffering lie the three poisons: labha, greed or attachment, the desire to possess, to hold, to consume; dosa, hatred or aversion, the rejection of what we dislike or fear; moha, delusion or ignorance, the inability to see things as they truly are. These three are considered the root causes of all unwholesome actions and thus the foundation of suffering. They give rise to countless other negative states such as jealousy, pride, arrogance, and fear. Buddhist practice involves purifying the mind of these poisons through generosity, against greed; loving-kindness, against hatred; wisdom, against delusion. Through meditation and ethical conduct, one observes these poisons in action and gradually weakens them, thereby reducing suffering. Suffering in samsara, the cycle of birth and death. Samsara is the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth driven by karma and craving. In this cycle, beings are continually reborn into different realms depending on their actions. These realms include Deva, gods, lives of pleasure, but still subject to impermanence. Asura, jealous gods, envy and conflict dominate. Human, the most favorable realm for enlightenment, due to balance of pleasure and pain. Animal, driven by instinct, fear, and suffering. Preta, hungry ghosts, intense craving and frustration. Naraka, hell, extreme suffering and torment. Even the highest realms are temporary. Thus, the ultimate goal in Buddhism is not to attain a better rebirth, but to liberate oneself from samsara entirely. The path to the cessation of suffering. If suffering has a cause, then it must also have a solution. This is the insight of the third noble truth: the cessation of suffering is possible. The fourth noble truth then outlines the way, the noble eightfold path. The eightfold path. Right view, understanding the four noble truths and karma. Right intention, renunciation, goodwill, and non-harming. Right speech, speaking truthfully and kindly. Right action, ethical conduct, non-killing, non-stealing, no misconduct. Right livelihood, making a living without harming others. Right effort, cultivating wholesome states. Right mindfulness, awareness of body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. Right concentration, meditation that leads to insight and liberation. Through this path, the causes of suffering, craving, ignorance, and clinging, are gradually weakened and eliminated. The result is nirvana, a state of peace beyond birth and death, free from suffering. The nature of nirvana, the end of suffering. To fully understand the cause of suffering, one must also understand its opposite, nirvana. According to Buddhism, nirvana is the cessation of dukkha, the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is not a place or a heaven, but a state of liberation, a complete freedom from the conditions that create suffering. What is nirvana? Nirvana, nibbana in Pali, literally means blowing out, as in the extinguishing of a flame. What is extinguished is the fire of craving, which fuels the cycle of birth and death. When craving ceases, so too does suffering. The Buddha described nirvana in terms such as the unborn, unaging, and deathless. The unconditioned. The supreme peace. The ultimate freedom. Nirvana is achieved through the complete understanding and uprooting of the causes of suffering. It is the final goal of Buddhist practice. The realization of nirvana. Nirvana is not an abstract concept but a reality that can be experienced through diligent practice. Those who attain it are called arahants, beings who have completely eliminated the defilements. They still live in the world but are not affected by it. They are free from clinging, even to their own existence. For the ordinary practitioner, even glimpses of this freedom, through mindfulness, compassion, and insight, can significantly reduce suffering. The possibility of total liberation serves as a motivation for deep spiritual practice. Buddhist psychology, understanding the mind's role in suffering. Buddhist teachings emphasize the mind as the chief source of both suffering and liberation. One of the most famous verses from the Dhammapada states, "Mind is the forerunner of all states. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows." The mind is the creator of suffering. Suffering is not always the result of external events. Often, it arises from our interpretation and reaction to those events. For example, a person says something harsh. If we cling to self-image, we suffer. A beloved item is lost. If we're attached, we suffer. A plan fails. If we expect control, we suffer. The mind creates narratives, expectations, and identifications. These, more than the events themselves, generate suffering. Training the mind. Buddhist practice centers on mind training. Through meditation, we learn to observe our thoughts and emotions without reacting. Through mindfulness, we become aware of patterns of craving and aversion. Through wisdom, we begin to see things as they truly are. Gradually, the mind becomes more balanced, open, and peaceful. The result is less suffering, not because the world changes, but because our relationship to it does. Emotions and suffering, the Buddhist view. Buddhism does not deny the existence of emotions. It acknowledges them as natural phenomena, but it also teaches that unwholesome emotional patterns lead to suffering. The unwholesome roots. As previously discussed, the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, are emotional tendencies that lead to suffering. But they manifest in many ways. Jealousy arises from comparison. Anger arises from unmet expectations. Fear arises from clinging to security. These emotions are not inherently evil, but if left unchecked, they condition our actions and reinforce suffering. The antidotes. Buddhism offers specific practices to counteract these emotional roots: loving-kindness, metta, to counter hatred; compassion, karuna, to meet suffering with care; sympathetic joy, mudita, to counter jealousy; equanimity, upekkha, to balance the mind amid change. These four are known as the Brahma-viharas, the four divine abodes. Cultivating them transforms the emotional landscape and directly reduces the causes of suffering. Suffering in Mahayana and Theravada perspectives. Though all Buddhist traditions agree on the core teachings, different schools emphasize different aspects of suffering and its resolution. Theravada perspective. Theravada Buddhism, dominant in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Myanmar, focuses on individual liberation through insight into the nature of reality. The causes of suffering are craving and clinging, ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, identification with the five aggregates. Theravada practices, such as vipassana meditation and monastic discipline, aim to develop deep insight and renunciation. Mahayana perspective. Mahayana Buddhism, found in East Asia, emphasizes compassion and emptiness, sunyata. It sees suffering as arising not only from individual delusion but from a failure to realize the interdependence of all beings. The ideal is the bodhisattva, one who delays personal nirvana to help others awaken. Suffering in Mahayana is also connected to ignorance of emptiness, the failure to understand that all phenomena are empty of independent existence. Realizing this helps to uproot the dualities that cause suffering. Vajrayana and the transformation of suffering. In Vajrayana Buddhism, particularly in Tibetan traditions, suffering is not merely to be escaped or rejected but transformed into wisdom and compassion. This school sees all experience, even painful emotions, as energy that can be channeled on the path. Tantric methods. Vajrayana uses powerful techniques such as mantra recitation, visualization of deities, rituals and symbolic gestures. These are designed to transmute the three poisons into their pure forms: greed into generosity, hatred into compassion, delusion into wisdom. This radical approach affirms that suffering can be used as fuel for enlightenment when approached with mindfulness and proper guidance. The contemporary relevance of Buddhist teachings on suffering. In the modern world, suffering takes on many forms: anxiety, depression, alienation, burnout, and existential despair. Although external conditions have improved in many ways, inner suffering remains widespread. Why Buddhist teachings still matter. Buddhism's diagnosis of suffering remains as relevant today as it was 2,500 years ago. Its insights into the mind, desire, impermanence, and the illusion of self resonate with modern psychology and neuroscience. Application in daily life. Mindfulness meditation is now widely practiced for stress reduction. Compassion training is being introduced in schools, workplaces, and hospitals. Cognitive behavioral therapy shares many parallels with Buddhist methods for challenging distorted thinking. People use Buddhist teachings to deal with addiction, trauma, and loss. The universality and practicality of these teachings have led to their global spread, regardless of religious identity. The role of impermanence, anicca, in suffering. At the heart of Buddhist understanding lies the principle of impermanence, anicca. Everything in life, our bodies, relationships, emotions, possessions, and even our thoughts, are in constant flux. Nothing remains static. Yet, we often live as though things should be permanent. This mismatch between reality and expectation creates suffering, impermanence, and emotional pain. A common source of suffering is the desire to hold on to pleasant experiences or avoid unpleasant ones. For instance, we suffer when a loved one dies because we believe they would be with us forever. We suffer when we lose a job, because we expected stability. We suffer when our health deteriorates, because we cling to youth. These events are painful not just because they happen, but because they challenge our illusions of permanence. Recognizing impermanence doesn't eliminate pain, but it reduces the resistance that magnifies suffering. Freedom through acceptance. When practitioners deeply realize the truth of anicca, they stop clinging to experiences. They begin to live with greater equanimity, appreciating the present without trying to grasp or push away. This mental shift softens suffering, opens the heart, and aligns perception with reality. The illusion of control and the birth of suffering. Another overlooked root of suffering is the illusion of control. We tend to believe that we can manage, predict, or direct life according to our will. This assumption gives rise to frustration and anxiety when life doesn't cooperate. The nature of control. We believe we control our future, other people's opinions, our health, world events. In truth, many of these factors are beyond our influence. This belief in control breeds attachment to outcomes, and when those outcomes fail to materialize, we suffer. Buddhist response. The Buddha taught the practice of letting go. This doesn't mean passivity, but a willingness to act without clinging to results. This is called non-attachment or detachment with compassion. Letting go of the illusion of control cultivates inner peace. It allows us to respond rather than react, to accept rather than resist, and to love without possessiveness. The role of desire and expectation. While craving, tanha, is central to suffering, expectations can be understood as a subtler form of craving. We often construct elaborate mental scenarios of how life should be, and we suffer when life doesn't follow our script. Common expectations that cause suffering. I should always be happy. Others should treat me kindly. If I work hard, I must succeed. Bad things shouldn't happen to good people. These are rooted in delusion. They ignore the complexity of life. When we set expectations based on these illusions, we guarantee disappointment. The Buddhist remedy. Instead of rigid expectations, Buddhism encourages open-minded awareness. Life is not obligated to fulfill our mental projections. Freedom arises when we meet life as it is, not as we think it should be. This shift doesn't dull joy, it allows for authentic joy, arising from clarity and acceptance rather than fantasy. Collective suffering and social dimensions in Buddhism. While the Buddha emphasized personal responsibility, he also acknowledged collective suffering, pain caused by societal structures, wars, injustice, poverty, and ecological destruction. Contemporary Buddhists have expanded on this insight. Engaged Buddhism. Figures like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama have pioneered engaged Buddhism, which integrates spiritual practice with social responsibility. Causes of collective suffering include greed-driven economies, institutionalized hatred or discrimination, environmental destruction, ignorance reinforced by media and culture. Buddhism teaches that these social ills are manifestations of the three poisons, magnified at a collective level. Addressing them requires both inner transformation and compassionate action. Compassion as response. The antidote is not despair, but compassion in action. Buddhist ethics call on practitioners to reduce harm wherever possible, through right speech, right livelihood, environmental care, and social justice. In this view, suffering is both personal and political, requiring both inward and outward work. Beyond suffering, joy, peace, and liberation. Understanding suffering is not a pessimistic pursuit. Buddhism begins with suffering to end it. The ultimate goal is not just to avoid pain, but to cultivate inner peace, samatha, joy, pity, loving-kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, wisdom, panna. Fruits of the path. Practitioners who follow the Noble Eightfold Path report greater emotional resilience, reduced stress and anxiety, increased clarity and awareness, a sense of connection with others, a deepening of compassion. These are not mystical gifts, they are natural outcomes of training the mind and heart to let go of the roots of suffering. Enlightenment is possible. The Buddha didn't claim to be a god or savior. He said, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering." His invitation was simple but profound, to see the world clearly, to free the mind, and to live with compassion. This possibility of awakening is open to all who seek it with sincerity and effort. The Buddhist vision of ending suffering. Buddhism offers one of the most comprehensive analyses of human suffering found in any tradition. Rather than offering simplistic comfort, it invites us to look deeply into the structure of reality and mind. It explains suffering not as a punishment or a test, but as a natural consequence of how we relate to experience. The core insights can be summarized as, suffering exists, life contains pain, loss, aging, and death. Suffering has causes, primarily craving, clinging, and ignorance. Suffering can end, liberation is possible. There is a path to its end, through ethics, meditation, and wisdom. This path is not about escaping life, but about entering it fully and fearlessly, armed with awareness and compassion. Buddhism doesn't promise that pain will vanish, but it does promise that the mental suffering built on that pain can cease. By understanding the causes of suffering, we gain the power to remove them. And in their absence, what remains is peace, not the peace of passivity, but the vibrant peace of wisdom, compassion, and freedom. This is the vision of the Buddha, not a perfect life, but a free life. So, according to Buddhism, suffering, known as dukkha, is an inherent part of human existence. It arises not simply from external hardships but from internal conditions such as craving, tanha, clinging, upadana, and ignorance, avijja. These mental defilements create a distorted relationship with reality, causing us to grasp at impermanent things, resist change, and cling to a false sense of self. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths offer a profound framework. They identify the presence of suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its end. Central to overcoming suffering is the cultivation of wisdom, ethical living, and mental discipline through the Noble Eightfold Path. Buddhism teaches that liberation from suffering is possible, not by changing the world, but by transforming the mind. Understanding impermanence, embracing non-attachment, and practicing compassion allow individuals to break free from the cycle of reactivity and delusion. Whether practiced through meditation, mindful living, or social engagement, the Buddhist path provides tools to dissolve suffering at its root. Ultimately, Buddhism is not a philosophy of despair, but a path to profound peace, clarity, and inner freedom. By realizing the causes of suffering, we gain the power to end it, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all beings.